the Galactic Empire had no fears. It was a force of nature, an unstoppable behemoth that had crushed entire civilizations with ease. Planets fell in line, systems bent to its will. The galaxy bowed before it. But one morning, a message pierced through the fabric of space, strange and unexpected. No one had anticipated the warning and no one believed it. Humanity will no longer be your quiet neighbors. The words echoed in the cold void, broadcast across every channel in the galaxy, delivered without fanfare but with unshakable certainty. A simple message from Earth, the homeworld of a species the Empire had long dismissed as primitive, fearful, and incapable of war. It was an insult, a defiant declaration against the Empire's established order. The message was no more than a speck in the infinite cosmos, a whisper of resistance. But it wasn't the words that unsettled the Empire, it was the audacity. High in the command chambers of the Empire's capital, Chancellor Velix sat, unmoving as the message blinked across his screen. His three eyes narrowed, the vertical slit pupils contracting with a mix of disbelief and irritation. The species known as humanity, a primitive race from a backwater world, had dared to send a message that no one had ever dared to send before. Are we supposed to take this seriously? Velix muttered to his inner circle, a mix of generals and political advisors surrounding him. Absolutely not, Chancellor, one of the generals scoffed, his mandibles clicking in disdain. It's a pathetic attempt at drawing attention. Nothing more. The humans have no fleet, no infrastructure, no army worthy of our notice. Velix's second-in-command, a sleek, reptilian tactician named Xyler, leaned in. We've received intelligence reports from our outer colonies. Humans have been quietly amassing small, scattered fleets, but they've never shown the capability to project power. They're not even part of the Galactic Council, Velix remarked. A rebellion? An uprising? We'll crush them like we've done with countless others. Despite the dismissal, the council members exchanged uncertain glances. Even if the humans were nothing more than a nuisance, the very act of defying the Empire's authority was unprecedented. The Empire had made examples of entire species, and now Earth was drawing a line in the sand. Dispatch a fleet to Earth, Velix finally ordered, his voice cold and commanding. Let's silence their defiance once and for all. The fleet that responded was the pride of the Empire, a massive armada of dreadnoughts and warships designed to crush any resistance. The humans would soon learn that their warning was a grave mistake. The fleet set a course, passing through the stars at unimaginable speeds, preparing to deliver the crushing blow. But as the Empire's fleet moved toward Earth, something began to feel off. Intelligence reports confirmed that the human homeworld had been preparing, but no one could have predicted what came next. On the day the Empire's fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's atmosphere, they found nothing but silence. No signs of massive cities, no planetary defenses, not a single hint of the bustling civilization that had defied them. In fact, Earth was eerily quiet. Then, in the midst of their confusion, a series of waves burst forth from the planet. The initial scan detected nothing out of the ordinary, until they found it. Impossible, the fleet commander muttered, staring at his readouts. There's no way. Earth's silence had been a trap. The human world, underestimated for centuries, had crafted a hidden weapon unlike anything the Empire had seen. Small, rapid-moving ships, human-designed and capable of cloaking and evasive maneuvers, swarmed through the fleet like deadly insects. For the first time in centuries, the Empire's confidence faltered. The fleet commander barked orders, but his voice shook. A human vessel had just disabled one of the Empire's most advanced warships with a single strike, and there was no sign of stopping. The humans had been waiting. They had prepared. Earth wasn't afraid of war, they had been biding their time. As the first explosions rocked the fleet, the Empire's commanders realized something else. The humans weren't afraid of war. They were just waiting for their moment. And now that moment had arrived. The warning was clear. And it was far too late to ignore. The Empire had made a fatal mistake. No one had expected it, least of all the Emperor himself. Humanity's message was dismissed as the desperate cries of a species that had no place in the grand galactic order. But the moment Earth's ship struck, it became clear. They were not the powerless, insignificant beings everyone had believed them to be. The Empire's fleet was still reeling from the initial assault, staggered by the sudden, brutal attack. The humans had launched their strike with terrifying precision. No fleets, no planetary defenses, just a network of stealth ships that tore through the Empire's forces like a predator ripping apart its prey. Admiral Zorith, leader of the Imperial forces sent to quell the so-called rebellion, paced back and forth in the war room, his scales glistening in the harsh light of the command center. His sharp eyes, accustomed to the calm of battle, flickered with disbelief. The human ships were smaller than expected, quicker and deadlier. Each one maneuvered with a ferocity that defied logic, tearing into the Empire's ranks with surgical precision. "They've learned," Zorith muttered to himself, a creeping realization settling in. "They've learned from us." The Empire had prided itself on its superiority, on its unyielding control over every system it ruled. But humanity had made it clear that their power did not lie in brute force alone. It was in their adaptability, their cunning, and their willingness to embrace every tool at their disposal. What was meant to be a simple victory turned into a vicious counteroffensive. A sharp ping broke Zoritha's reverie. One of his officers, a nervous young Arcturian, turned to him with a pale face. "Admiral, the outer ring is falling. Their ships are tearing through our blockade." Zoritha's claws curled into fists. The humans were no longer on the defensive. They had taken the fight to the Empire's doorstep, and the result was chaos. Each time the Empire's ships tried to regroup, the humans adapted, launching precise cyber attacks that disabled key communication systems or sabotaged the most advanced weapons on the Empire's ships. Entire fleets were being decimated, not by firepower but by sheer human ingenuity. On Earth's home front, the scene was just as grim. The government leaders, previously skeptical of their military's ability to fight back against such overwhelming force, watched in stunned silence as the first human victory was broadcast across the galaxy. Earth's ships weren't merely surviving, they were winning. General Kale, one of the key leaders behind humanity's strike, surveyed the damage in the command center. A human-made dreadnought, an experimental ship barely a year old, had single-handedly crippled an entire Imperial warfleet. The fact that such a vessel even existed was a shock to the Empire. For centuries, humanity had been dismissed as incapable of producing anything more advanced than their primitive warships. And yet here they were, outmaneuvering the greatest military force the galaxy had ever known. "We have them on the ropes, General," said Commander Juno, standing beside Kale. She looked out at the holographic map of the galaxy, where red markers indicated the location of every Imperial vessel. "For now," Kale replied grimly. "But don't think for a moment they'll back down. The Empire's arrogance will make them fight harder. They'll retaliate with everything they have." Juno's eyes darkened as she surveyed the map. The humans had struck first, but they would not win this war with small victories alone. A decisive blow was needed, one that would make the Empire rethink its position entirely. "You're right," she said finally, her voice steady. "It's time we show them the full strength of humanity." Back in the heart of the Empire, Velix sat on his throne, his three eyes narrowing as he watched the streams of data flood the holographic display before him. The fleet was in disarray. The reports were staggering. The humans had managed to not only survive, they were taking back ground that had been under Imperial rule for centuries. The borders they once considered secure were now under siege, and the soldiers they had considered inferior were showing themselves to be far more capable than expected. "Their tactics," Velix began, his voice colder than ice. "They don't fight like the lesser species we've encountered. They fight like they have nothing to lose." His advisors were silent, a rare moment of agreement in the chamber. The Empire had encountered countless rebellions, uprisings and invasions, but none had been like this. The humans weren't afraid. They weren't even acting out of desperation. They were fighting with purpose. "Prepare the fleet for a counterstrike," Velix ordered, his voice cutting through the still air. "This will be the final lesson for them. We will remind them of their place in the galaxy." The humans had shown that they weren't afraid of war. But in that same breath, the Empire had shown its fear of what humanity could become. The battle for the galaxy had just begun. The Empire had underestimated humanity for the last time. In the void between stars, Imperial commanders scrambled to regain control after humanity's unrelenting strikes. They had called it a fluke, an isolated incident. But as the days passed and more systems fell, the terrifying reality set in. This wasn't an accident. Humanity had unleashed something no one could have anticipated. On Earth, General Kale stood over a table littered with data readouts, his mind racing through every possible countermeasure. The first few victories had been hard-won, but now it was clear, the war had only just begun. "We've broken their outer defenses, General," Commander Juno said, her voice low but determined. "But we're not just facing fleets anymore. We're up against the entire might of the Empire. If we don't hit them hard and fast, they'll regroup." Kale looked down at the glowing map of the galaxy, a sea of red and green markers. Humanity had achieved something extraordinary, taking back sectors, disabling Imperial command posts. But the Empire would not let this insult slide. Soon, the full force of the Imperial war machine would be unleashed. But Kale wasn't worried about the numbers. It wasn't about the ships or the firepower. It was about the Empire's fatal weakness, its reliance on predictable warfare. "We won't win by matching them ship for ship," Kale said, his tone sharp. "We need to strike where they don't expect it. We need to remind them that humanity fights on a different level." It was then that Kale revealed what he had been keeping hidden: a fleet of experimental ships, prototypes that had been in development for years, designed to capitalize on the very thing the Empire had dismissed. The humans had learned to think like their enemies, adapt like no other species, and now they would show the Empire what a truly unpredictable force looked like. "We're going to hit their heart," Kale said, tapping the map where the Empire's central command station stood, the most heavily fortified location in the galaxy. "Not with brute force but with precision. We'll remind them of what they've forgotten." The Empire, for all its might, had not prepared for the one thing humanity was best at: guerrilla warfare. The Empire's fleets were built for all-out battles, for wars of attrition and overwhelming force. Humanity's strength, however, lay in its ability to strike fast, to slip through the cracks and strike fear into the hearts of the enemy. As the humans prepared their assault, the Empire, far from being intimidated, was enraged. Velix, still reeling from the initial losses, ordered his top strategist to prepare for a counteroffensive. He would not allow the insolence of Earth to go unanswered. The humans had shown they could fight, but now they would face the full wrath of the Empire's might. But even as Velix plotted, he had one nagging question on his mind: how had the humans known how to exploit the Empire's weaknesses? It wasn't just their technological advancements. It was something more primal, something instinctual. The humans had dug into the deepest fears of the Empire, manipulating their very understanding of warfare. "They're like animals," Velix muttered, pacing in his private chambers. "They fight like animals with no rules, no honor. They have no place in this galaxy." But what Velix didn't understand was that humanity's power came not from brute strength, but from the willingness to embrace chaos. The humans had spent millennia surviving on their own terms, constantly adapting, constantly overcoming. They had fought wars that no other species could fathom, not just in space but on their own world, against their own kind. The battle lines were drawn now. The Empire was desperate, throwing everything it had into the fray. But humanity had already won the most important battle. They had broken the Empire's belief in its own invincibility. And in that moment, Kale knew something the Empire didn't. Humanity was no longer playing by anyone's rules but their own. The next strike would be decisive. The humans had already proven they could survive. Now they would prove they could conquer. And the Empire would never see it coming. The Empire had made a critical error. They had underestimated Earth, and now it was too late to turn back. Admiral Zorith stood before the command console, eyes narrowing as the holographic display illuminated the bridge of his flagship. Earth's defenders were more organized than anticipated. The shock of their counteroffensive had rattled the Empire's command structure, but it was the humans' resolve that now terrified him. The battle for Earth had begun in earnest, and for the first time, Zorith questioned if the Empire could win. "Admiral, our fleet is in position," said his communications officer, her voice steady but strained. "The invasion is set. We can bombard their major cities and disable all of their defenses in one strike." Zorith's talon-like hands gripped the armrests of his command chair. "No. We can't afford to make it that simple." He turned to his tactical officer. "What's the status on Earth's planetary shields?" "We've disabled a few key nodes, but their shield generators are more advanced than expected," the officer replied. "They're adapting faster than we can counter." Zorith's eyes flickered with a mix of frustration and begrudging admiration. The humans had been preparing, planning for this moment for years, maybe even decades. They had no fleet, no overwhelming firepower, but what they had was the will to fight and the ability to fight smart. Across the galaxy, in the heart of the human resistance, General Kale stood in a darkened command room, his face lit only by the glow of the planet's tactical map. The Empire's fleet was already in the atmosphere, descending toward Earth's capital city with the intent to decimate everything in its path. There was no room for error now. Earth's fate rested in the hands of its defenders, and Kale had no intention of letting it slip away. "We've got one shot at this," Kale said, his voice cold and calculated. "Our forces are spread thin, but the Empire doesn't know where our true strength lies." Commander Juno nodded, her gaze fixed on the battlefield unfolding on the map. "They're overestimating their firepower. If we can hit them in their blind spots, we can break their formation. We just need to buy more time. The human forces, though outnumbered, were not without their advantages. Earth's environment, its diverse terrain and unpredictable weather patterns, offered them a strategic edge that no Imperial force could have predicted. As Zoratha's fleet moved into position, he failed to account for the cunning of the human resistance. The Empire's ships, once so formidable, found themselves bogged down in an endless series of traps and distractions. Earth's surface, a sprawling battlefield of cityscapes and forests, became a labyrinth that even the most advanced Imperial technology struggled to navigate. Back on Earth, the streets were alive with chaos. The human military, comprised of Special Forces soldiers trained in both advanced tactics and survival, fought with a ferocity that surprised even their own leaders. They did not rely solely on conventional weapons. They used the very environment against the Empire. With every street corner, every building, every shadow, the Empire's forces were ambushed, taken by surprise. A message from Kale's command center came through to Juno's comm unit. They're breaking formation. They're disoriented. It's working. Juno glanced at Kale, who was watching the screen intently. We've done it, she said, a flicker of hope in her voice. But Kale's expression remained grim. Not yet. The real battle is about to begin. As the Empire's command ships faltered, a new element of the human strategy came into play. Kale had known the Empire's arrogance. They would never expect Earth's true weapon, the devastating power of their underground resistance, a network of sleeper agents and forgotten weapons buried deep within the planet's crust. Hidden bunkers, secret laboratories and long-forgotten military assets were now coming online, and Earth was about to unleash its full force. Initiate the countdown, Kale ordered. Beneath the surface, massive electromagnetic cannons powered up, their once dormant systems now glowing with an eerie blue light. The Empire's forces had spent years invading other planets, assuming that humanity had no weapons capable of countering their fleet. But they had overlooked one simple truth. Earth had fought wars before, wars they never lost. And the weapons they were about to unleash were older than the Empire itself. As the first wave of human weapons fired, the ground itself seemed to shake, and the Empire's fleet was rattled. For the first time, Zorath felt genuine fear. His ships, once impenetrable, were now under siege by an enemy they thought they had already conquered. The electromagnetic pulses tore through the atmosphere, disabling shields and causing massive structural damage to the Imperial ships. But the Empire was not easily defeated. Zoratha's voice rang out over the comms, a roar of frustration. Retreat. We'll regroup and counterattack. The orders were given too late. As his ships began to withdraw, human bombers made their final assault. With pinpoint accuracy they tore through the weakened fleet, inflicting irreparable damage. Earth's victory had been achieved, not through sheer strength but through innovation, unity, and the spirit of survival that defined humanity. As the last of the Imperial ships fell from the sky, the human forces stood victorious. But Kale knew this was only the beginning. The Empire would return with a vengeance, but humanity had made its mark. Earth had proven that it was no longer a passive player in the galaxy. It had shown the Empire that the fight for survival could take any form, and that humanity was more than capable of winning. This was the first battle. The war had just begun. The Empire's pride was broken. And with it, their arrogance. For decades, the Galactic Empire had crushed every challenger that dared to rise against it. But humanity had proven to be a force unlike any other. The devastating loss of their fleet was more than just a tactical failure. It was a deep, visceral wound to the Empire's sense of invincibility. General Kale stood at the front of the command center, watching the flickering displays as his fleet began to regroup. Earth had survived, but they hadn't won yet. Not by a long shot. We've done it, General, Commander Juno said, her voice tight with exhaustion but laced with relief. We've inflicted serious damage. Their retreat signals a shift. Kale nodded, but his gaze remained locked on the screen. The Empire wasn't done yet. They never were. He knew they would regroup, recalibrate, and return with everything they had left. The Empire's resources were limitless. But so was humanity's resolve. We have no time for celebration, Kale said, his voice steel. This isn't over. They'll send a retaliation force within the week. We have to be ready. Juno hesitated before responding, her expression clouded. How? Our forces are still scattered. The Empire can bring in reinforcements faster than we can build our defenses. That's true, Kale said, his eyes narrowing. But they made a mistake. We know how they think. And that's going to cost them. Far from resting on their laurels, the human resistance set to work on an unprecedented offensive. Earth's most brilliant minds, military leaders and engineers gathered in hidden facilities beneath the surface, working tirelessly to adapt, evolve and ready humanity's next move. The Empire had underestimated them once, but now they would learn that humanity's strength lay in their relentless ability to adapt, to evolve, and to strike when least expected. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Velix, the Empire's chancellor, seethed with rage. The loss of Earth's defenses had been catastrophic. Not just in terms of battle but in terms of morale. His top officers and advisors stood in tense silence as the holographic display in the war room updated with new intelligence. "We cannot allow this humiliation to stand," Velix growled, his 3 eyes glimmering with fury. "Our fleets are in disarray but we still have the means to crush them. We will send a fleet large enough to wipe them out. No more games." A tactical officer spoke cautiously, his voice quivering. "Chancellor, we've received reports that the humans are rallying their forces. They've launched a number of covert operations on other systems. They are spreading like wildfire, exploiting the weaknesses we've left behind." Velix slammed his fist onto the console, sending a shockwave of energy through the room. "I don't care. We will bury them. No more delays. The final assault will begin tomorrow." Back on Earth, Kale's instincts told him it was coming. The Empire had retreated for now but the threat loomed large. Humanity's victories had only bought them time, and Kale knew the Empire would strike back with brutal efficiency. "I need eyes everywhere," Kale said to Juno. "We cannot afford to be caught off guard again." The intelligence networks were already in motion. Humanity's spies, hackers, and soldiers moved with purpose, gathering critical information. Kale knew the Empire's next move would be swift and brutal, but this time humanity wouldn't wait. They'd use the Empire's tactics against them. Days passed in tense preparation. Earth's forces dug in, laying traps, strengthening their positions and bracing for the oncoming storm. Meanwhile, Kale's advisors worked around the clock to develop a strategy that would exploit the Empire's overconfidence. They knew what the Empire didn't. Humanity had learned how to make their enemies' greatest strengths into weaknesses. Finally the attack came. Massive Imperial warships, some the size of entire cities, emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. It was a fleet of overwhelming force, a spectacle of destruction in the making. The Empire had come to finish what it started. And this time they would not be underestimated. But Kale was ready. His voice rang out across the comms. "All forces engage." Human ships, hidden in plain sight, sprang to life. It wasn't a frontal assault. They didn't need brute strength. It was a surgical strike, precise and deadly. While the Empire ships tried to lock on, they found themselves caught in a trap of their own making. Kale had anticipated their tactics down to the smallest detail. The first wave of Imperial fighters was neutralized before it could even launch, their paths intercepted by human-designed drones equipped with advanced EMP pulses. The second wave was drawn into a complex web of false signals, sensor jams and decoys, making it impossible to identify true targets. The Empire's superior firepower became irrelevant as their own arrogance turned their strength into a liability. And then came the final blow. The fleet of Imperial warships, now scattered and confused, was picked apart systematically. Each ship was methodically disabled or destroyed, not with overwhelming force, but with cold precision. Earth's military had learned the true art of warfare, the art of patience, planning, and striking when the enemy least expected it. Velix's command ship, once the pride of the Empire, became a floating wreck, riddled with fires and catastrophic failures. As the last of the Imperial ships retreated, Kale's voice came through loud and clear. "This is our galaxy now." The humans had turned the tide, proving that they could not only survive, they could dominate. The Empire had come to Earth to crush them, but it was the Empire that had been crushed instead. The war had shifted. Humanity had won, but the true battle was yet to come. The Empire's collapse began with a single mistake, and it wasn't made by humanity. Velix, the Chancellor of the Galactic Empire, sat in his throne room, his body rigid with barely contained fury. The reports flooding in were grim. His fleet, his pride, was shattered. Earth had proven to be a far more formidable opponent than anticipated, and now the galaxy was watching. They were waiting for the final blow. "We can still reclaim control," Velix muttered to himself, though even he didn't believe the words anymore. The rebellion had escalated into a full-scale war, and despite their best efforts, the Empire had been pushed to its breaking point. "Summon the generals. We must act now." The holographic display in front of him flickered as his most trusted officers materialized, their faces tense, their minds on the brink of panic. A defeated fleet couldn't fight a war, and they all knew it. Their once dominant forces were now scattered, their command structure fractured. "The humans have done the impossible," General Zyler said, her voice edged with disbelief. "They've shattered our fleet and crippled our control over the outer systems. But even so, we still hold the core worlds. We have resources. We have armies. We have the means to rebuild." Felix shook his head. "Rebuilding is not enough. The humans, they've exposed our vulnerabilities. The galaxy sees us for what we are, a crumbling empire too weak to hold its own." For the first time in his career, Felix felt the crushing weight of doubt. "Have you prepared the weapon?" he asked quietly, his eyes cold and calculating. Zyler hesitated. "It is ready, but—" "No more hesitation," Felix barked. "We will strike the humans where it hurts the most. Their homeworld. We will burn Earth to the ground. The galaxy will see that we still hold power." As his officers left to carry out his orders, Felix felt the last of his patience slip away. Humanity had already taken so much from the Empire, and now it was time to end it once and for all. On Earth, Kale stood in a war room, staring at the map that stretched across the central display. The reports had been pouring in all day. The Empire was preparing for its final offensive, gathering its most elite forces for a decisive strike. It was the blow they had been waiting for. But Kale was not afraid. "We have one chance," Kale said, his voice steady, his eyes cold. "The Empire may have overwhelming power, but they've forgotten the most important thing. They don't know how to fight us anymore. They don't know how we think." Commander Juno stood beside him, her expression grim but resolute. "You think we can stop them? They'll come with everything they've got." "They think they know what they're up against," Kale replied. "But they don't understand Earth. They don't understand humanity." The final battle was set to begin, but Kale had prepared one last move, a calculated risk that could turn the tide once and for all. As the Empire's flagship, the Titanes, approached Earth, the human forces waited. The sky above the planet's surface darkened as the Empire's warships descended, their enormous forms blotting out the sun. It was a sight meant to inspire fear, but the humans on the ground saw it differently. This was not an invasion, it was an opportunity. "Now," Kale whispered just as the Empire's fleet reached orbit. Human ships, concealed in the dark expanse of space, emerged from the shadows. Their weapons fired in unison, striking the Empire's ships with surgical precision. This time humanity's strategy was clear, not to fight for survival, but to annihilate their enemy once and for all. The Empire's flagship, Titanes, was the first to fall. Its shields flickered, then shattered under the weight of human weaponry. Explosions erupted as the ship split in two, its once mighty form drifting into the void. Felix's voice echoed in the comms as his flagship fell. "No, this cannot be." But it was too late. The Empire had already lost. As the final Imperial warships scattered in retreat, Kale stood on the command deck, watching the once proud fleets of the Empire burn. They had underestimated Earth. They had underestimated humanity. And now the galaxy would learn that the Empire's reign was over. Humanity had not just survived, they had conquered. And the galaxy would never be the same again.